Hi everyone, Zarina here, aka Woolly Nomad, and welcome to episode 6 of the easy sock knitting tutorial. It's a bit of a mouthful, and I could add in rounded toe and helical as well, so that would make it even longer. Anyway, this is where we are so far, and today we're going to pop on a rib. So I'm going to show you how to do a rib. But let's go through what we've done so far. So in episode 1, we talked about materials. So if you haven't watched any of the other episodes, go back, watch episode 1, where I talk about materials. In episode 2, we did the cast on, which was a Turkish cast on. Episode 3 was a rounded toe and how to make one. So that was increases. Episode 4 was helical knitting. And in the last episode, episode 5, we added in a waist yarn because we're going to do an afterthought heel. So I've knit up since then, and this is the leg area. So if I just marry it up to a sock I've already got, which, sorry, it's all a bit crumpled because these were in a bag. Right, so yeah, so that's the foot area. And then I have obviously tuck that in. I have knit up to where I think I want the rib to go. But you can try this on a little bit and see if you want to, or just like from your heel area, not heel, yeah, sort of heel bone, ankle bone, measure it up and see how long you want the sock to be. I think you wouldn't want it too long because you might have to increase as you go up the calf, you see, to accommodate the fact that your calf kind of gets bigger as you go up. But these are certainly a big enough size or a long enough size for me. So I'm going to stop here. And then I'm going to, I'll add in, actually, I'll probably add in here somewhere how many stitches because I'll have to count them. So I'll add that in afterwards when I'm editing. So let me show you how to add on a ribbed cuff. So I've cut one of the threads, and it's the Drops Fable yarn. So out of the 2 yarns, I've decided to do the rib in the king coal. Sorry, this ball looks a bit weird, doesn't it? I should have done something nice to it, but yeah. But this is what happens, isn't it? This is reality. Reality, this is what your balls look like. They don't always look pristine, do they? So anyway, I'm going to use this for the rib because there was more of this yarn. There is more of this yarn than this. So this was 100 grams. This was the king coal, and the Drops Fable was 50 grams. So I'm going to use the king coal for the ribs because I need to use that for the second sock in terms of helical knitting and also knitting the end, the toe. Yeah. So I better conserve some of it. Otherwise the second sock's going to look a little bit different up here because there won't be any of this left. Right, so I've cut that off and I'm going to move that to one side. Yeah, and that's the little tail. It's there. I'm going to pop that in, get it out of the way. Right, and now what we, oops, Daisy. Move the light or something. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to knit the rib. Right, now I'm wondering, shall I just move in a little bit with the camera? Hang on. So that's the needles that we've just knit. That's the row we finished. That other helical yarn is behind there, and we've cut that one off. We don't need that. So that's what we're going to start with. I'm just going to zoom in a tiny bit so that, yeah, yep, visible. Right, so what we do first is the first stitch is a knit stitch, and if you're just joining us and you don't want to know what a knit stitch is, this is basically what it is. But I also have a tutorial that tells us how to knit a knit stitch. But let me knit that again just in case. So you hold your knitting like so, your needle goes in from the front but towards the back, you take your yarn round and you pull it out. So yeah, go back to into the tutorial playlist and you will find how to knit a knit stitch. Now we're going to knit a purl. So to knit a purl, we bring the yarn forward and we take the needle into the front of the yarn and we yarn forward over the stitch, yeah? So that's a purl. And that's what makes up our rib. So one knit and one purl. A knit and a purl is what is making up the rib. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit the rest of the row. When you get back to this knit stitch, that should be just a knit stitch. If you come back here and you're on a purl stitch, but you're presented with a knit stitch, well, just knit it. Because likely what's happened is you've dropped a stitch along the way somewhere, and there's no need to make an extra stitch because we're trying to pull the knitting in with the rib. That's the whole point of the rib. It pulls it in to hold your sock up. And then when I get back here, I will show you in a bit more detail about what I mean. Just quickly, this is where our second yarn is, the helical yarn that we were using. And we've got the tail in the back, and we're just going to knit that as normal. So I'm on a purl stitch here. So my next stitch is a knit stitch. And then it's going to be a bit loose, so don't worry, you just need to pull that in the back. And then you just continue on. Purl, knit, purl, etc. So I'll meet you back here in a bit. So my last stitch was a purl stitch. So that means I've got an even number of stitches on my needles. So I'm happy with that. So my next stitch, when I turn the work around, the stitch I started off with was a knit stitch. So I will just carry on knit, purl, knit, purl. Now if you get to this point at the end here and you find that's a knit stitch, it means you've lost a stitch somewhere, and that doesn't really matter. But what you've got to then do is you've got to continue and do the next stitch as a knit stitch. So the way to tell is if you look carefully at your stitches, the knit stitch has kind of a V underneath it, or it's kind of wearing a little collar even, and the purl stitch is a bump or a line. So that's how you can tell which is a knit and which is a purl. Yeah, and these are very small stitches. So I don't know if you can see, but see that there, my ugly thumb. Yeah, it's funny I could move them out of the way, but you need fingers and thumbs to knit, sadly. Right, so I'm going to knit a few rows anyway, and then come back and show you my progress before we wrap up. So I've completed about 10 rows of rib. And as you can see, the variegated yarn gives a nice contrast to the helical knit. But you've still got interest and colour and stripes and stuff going on. Depends on what yarn you've got, of course, but yeah, variegated yarn is great. So what we need to do now is we need to cast off this rib, and I'm going to use a stretchy cast off, which, I mean, I don't know what it's called. It might be the Judy's Magic one, it might not be, I'm not quite sure. It's what I normally do. I'm going to show you how I do that. So, right, so you knit the first stitch and then you purl the second stitch and then you purl both stitches. So the next stitch is a knit, so you knit the next stitch and then you knit both stitches off. Like so. I'll do that again. So we're purling and we're going to purl that off. So you kind of go in the direction, or rather you go in the stitch direction of where the stitch is going. So the next stitch is a knit stitch. I'm going to knit that off. Next stitch is a purl stitch. And I'm going to purl that off. See, and you get this kind of, let me just loosen that out, take my needle off a second. Get quite a nice loosey-goosey kind of edge, which, you know, when you wash and block the sock, that kind of pulls in, but it remains loose so you can get your sock on nicely, so it's not right. What you don't want is this top bit to be tight and hard to get on, because that's uncomfortable. So it's nice to have it loose, but at the same time, like I said, it pulls in because it's the nature of wool to pull in. But yeah, so I'll do a couple more just so you know what I'm doing, just in case. You can always go back and rewind and have a look as well. Right, so that's a knit stitch, so I'm going to knit it, and then I'm going to knit. So knitting both of them, what you can do is you can put them back on like so, and then knit if that's easier. Oops, it's a bit loose. It doesn't want to come off now. Yeah, there we go. And then the next one is a purl. And what you can do is you can put them both back on, like so, and then purl. Next one's a knit. There you go. So I'll meet you back here when I've done them all. So I just wanted to show you the last stitch, and I've just done a knit, so the next one's a purl. So yarn forward, purl stitch, and then as before, pop it on the needle, then take it through, and then what we're going to do is, I mean, it looks a bit like there's going to be a hole there or something, but that's going to be in the sewing up afterwards. So what I tend to do, I'm just going to cut this off here. There we go. Sorry, the lighting's a bit funny because it's gone dark. Right, let me move over. Too many things on the table as usual. So when we sew that in, that will neaten it up. So we're going to do a sewing session right at the end. So we have now finished our sock-ish. So the last thing to do is going to be to put the heel in. And we've just got to put that heel in. There. So I will see you back here again in the next episode when that heel is going in. And then the very last episode will be sewing in all the ends and finishing it off. Now before I go, let's look at our little diagram that we've been keeping since the beginning. So we did our cast on, we did our increases, we've done our foot area, we've prepped the heel for later so we can put the afterthought in, we've done the leg area, and now we've done the cuff. We've cast it off, and that heel area is the last thing to do. Well, not the total last thing, because the very last thing will be sewing in the edges or sewing in the threads, etc. nicely and neatly. Yeah. Okay then. Have fun with the knitting.